Chapter 156, A Wild Ophiuchus Appeared. Raw link, February 4, 2017, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, March 25, 2020, Editor 1, Hand of Vecna, April 10, 2020, Editor 2, Key, April 18, 2020, translation link, ___ notice 1, it has been brought to my attention that. Congratulations to the series and the author, Firehead. On this note, I have sent an email to J Novel Club regarding whether the licensing covers the web novel version and whether we will be obligated to stop or not. Let's hope I didn't goof and actually sent the email to the right address. For now, the release will have no ETA until further notice, while we wait for their reply and discuss amongst ourselves what to do, going forward. Thank you for your understanding and for all the support you have given us thus far. //_______ On that day, at that venue, there was some excitement and commotion. The Street Corner Beauty Contest was an event which anyone could predict. I.P.8 in on a whim. It was an event which determined the number one beauty based on the votes of the audience. In a way, it was a slightly questionable and outdated event which prompted people to ask, they're still doing something like this in this day and age? To be completely upfront, it was a project organized by some popular TV variety show which broadcasted after midnight. Again, in a way, it was a slightly questionable show which was bound to fail even before the project launched. Although it was called a beauty contest, in truth, the main premise of the show might have been more along the lines of getting viewers to judge and ridicule the excessively self-conscious predict.I.P.ants. Naturally, this event had a hidden agenda. There was a dirty big surprise prepared by the procedures of the show. There would coincidentally be an idol by the name of Yewonsil Laniway, 18 years old, whose popularity was on the decline, who just so happened to be in the area and predict.I.P.aided, only for her to win at the expense of the other predict.I.P.ants who would be used as stepping stones. Needless to say, of course, she did not just coincidentally happen to be PAS.sing by the area. The entire thing was scripted and she was just waiting on standby. In other words, yes, that's exactly how it was. From the very beginning, she was guaranteed to win. It was just a last-ditch event prepared by her managers and television network in an attempt to regain her popularity. Although, on the question of popularity, the television show itself had no popularity from the beginning. Obviously, there were paid audience members amongst the crowd who were fully prepared to boost the stage's excitement. Having said that, in this day and age where the internet was very active, an easily seen-through act like this would be revealed in an instant, eventually sending everything into the ground or burning up in flames. Nevertheless, the idol's managers were proceeding with the plan despite knowing full well of the consequence. After all, if she was unable to sell at this moment in time, she would not succeed either way. As such, they did not care about what image she would end up getting. Or more like, there might be nothing to burn up in flames in the first place. As mentioned previously, it was not a popular television show to begin with. The possibility of no one seeing the show and the idol disappearing into obscurity was a more likely outcome. If anything, even burning in the depths of a scandal might be the better alternative. The next predict.I.P.and is, oh, could it be an idol getting on the stage? And finally, it was the idol Yewonsil's turn to get on stage. The people's expectations were heightened relatively just from her appearance. Yet at the same time, the fact that the people's expectation only heightened relatively was a tragic scene for the declined idol. Furthermore, a few within the audience sensed that this was all staged, thus they were looking up to the stage with cold dead eyes. But at that moment, everyone's line of sight drifted away from the stage. Oi, Bennett. They're in the middle of an event. Don't just cut across it. Like I care. There was an extremely beautiful young girl and a lady, both of whom were so beautiful that people could not believe they were of the same human species, coincidentally PAS.sing across the front of the stage. The young girl walking in the front had silver hair and the fluid U.S.tiered lady chasing the young girl from behind had bright golden hair. Regardless, the beauty of both of them was out of this world. In this respect, even the host was lost in thought and standing in a daze, involuntarily forgetting what was happening. The most pitiful person in this situation was the idol who had just appeared on the stage. Due to the two irregular individuals who had just said through the front of the stage, her presence was overshadowed entirely. Furthermore, even though she was the one who was supposed to step on the other Predict.I.P.ants, she was the one who was stepped on. Subsequently, one of the Predict.I.P.ants created a thread on a public forum for the idol event by the name of Flop and stating that they had become unable to sleep ever since they had seen the two PAS.Sursby who were too beautiful. Due to a photograph of the two PAS.Sursby that had been taken by a smartphone being posted on the thread, everything had blown up and became a commotion. Nevertheless, the two individuals remained ignorant of all of this. In addition, after all of this, there was another thread made with the T.I.Tle. I saw that blonde-haired one punching a truck with a supporting photograph. Not only that, but there were also even claims of I saw them jumping from one roof of a building to another, causing the commotion to rapidly explode. But again, the two of them remained ignorant of all of this. Asterisk 2 double cheeseburger sets. Lun lun la 2-0, and I'll also have a soft serve cone. This Ronaldo is happy to serve you. 3 Whilst we were heading towards Niigata, Bennett and I decided to take a detour and get a light lunch at a popular burger chain which had been opened all over the country. There might be some of you who were wondering why we chose to eat hamburgers of all things, and the answer to that was simple. I just wanted to taste that nostalgic junk food flavor for the first time in a while. After receiving our order from the shop attendant who was dressed in a clown costume, I headed towards where Bennett was sitting. Although this was a piece of irrelevant information, the shop attendant's uniform was that of Whack Ronald's mascot, Ronald the Founder. As for why he's the founder, I also did not know. So this world's food has so much salt, huh? And it tastes crude and sloppy. Well, it's junk food, so. Bennett criticized as she bit down on the double cheeseburger, but she did not stop eating, so it must have been acceptable for her. For me personally, I was expecting the typical "so this is an ice guy's food, huh? It's amazing" line and reaction that one often found in light novels from her, but now that I thought about it, she's technically the queen of a kingdom. So I supposed, she must have been used to eating good food. It was called something like food P.O.R.N, right? In those works, it's mainstream for kings and G.O.Ds to eat cheap food from Earth and have an overreaction. But unfortunately, Bennett did not follow the predictable mainstream pattern at all. Fortunately, whilst Bennett showed no reaction towards the cheeseburger, her expression changed just for a moment when she tasted the ice cream before eating it all up very quickly. Oh, I see. So she's surprised by the soft serve cone, huh? Indeed, there was no such thing as a soft serve cone on that side of the world. Frozen treats did exist, however, there were only simple ones such as sherbets. They were nothing more than a simple type of food where fruits, berries, and nectar were poured on top of snow or crushed ice. On Earth, it existed by the time the Old Testament was drawn up. Unexpectedly, the history of frozen treats dated back quite a bit. Subsequently, Bennett ordered me to go and purchase 5 more soft serve cones. Now that we had satisfied ourselves, we decided to recommence heading towards our destination. Honestly, it would have been faster for us to move on foot. However, enjoying the h.s.sle of going from one place to another was part of the charm of undertaking journeys. This time, we decided to head towards a train station. Once we got onto the bullet train, we sat down on one of the available seats within the free unreserved cart. Once the bullet train started moving, the scenery outside the window flowed backwards. In response, Bennett was looking on with interest. This is some decent speed. Is this thing also not a golem? Yeah, it's not. It's a strange thing. It doesn't use any mana, nor was this physical object bestowed with some limited decision-making capability like golems. In other words, it would mean that this lump of steel is moving on its own purely as a lump of steel, so for me, that's more magical than anything else. Inside the bullet train, I was reading a random book that I whimsically acquired from a bookstore just a moment ago. Bennett was unable to read this world's words. However, it seemed that her interest was piqued by manga as she was flipping through pages after pages and skimming through them. It didn't really matter, but what I was reading was a light novel. The content of the novel was about an ordinary young J.A. Paints man who was suddenly summoned to another world and, Hayaka, became peerless in an instant. Well, yeah, it's one of those commonly done plots. Back in the day, this series was popular enough for it to be animated, but when I spotted it in the bookstore, it had the newest edition label on, so I bought it on impulse. While I was in another world as Rupas, I thought a sequel had come out, but it's weird. There's absolutely no difference in content compared to what I had previously read. If I recalled correctly, this series concluded in the year 2022, so at the very least, the 2 volumes that I had acquired were not the latest edition or anything. Not only that, but even the errors which had been amended in the reprint version were also still as they were. What an outrageous bookshop. I could not understand what kind of nerve it must have to misrepresent the last 2 volumes of a series which had already concluded as the latest edition and sell them. On the other hand, as Bennett was unable to read this world's words, she was skimming through manga. Hers was even an older work of art. A popular series from the Showa era, for at the end of that series, the heroine was Ma.S. sacred by her neighbor who had become an insurgent, causing the protagonist of the series to abandon humanity to their doom. It was a grim and intense series where even the protagonist ended up dying after humanity was brought to ruin. After getting off the bullet train, I followed the road that I had in my memory and reached the house at the end of it. For some reason, there were a few incongruences between what was in my memory and reality, but the path itself should have been correct. It should have been correct, but I wondered why. Somehow, there were differences which did not match my memory. A shop which had just recently gone through remodeling and relaunched itself did not exist. Yet the shop prior to that remodeling was still standing and in business. Not only that, but it was also in a condition far better than what was in my memory. The playground equipment which was at the park should have been removed and taken away due to it being CLA.S.certified as dangerous from all the stain on the metal. It was not as if I made a mistake in my pathing. It should definitely be correct. Yes, it should have been correct. But in the place where my home should have been, there was an old and worn-out detached building. Needless to say, I did not know or recognize this building. Is this worn-out house your destination? No. I mean, the location should be correct, but how troubling. After reaching this far, I no longer knew what I was supposed to do anymore. Given the fact that it was someone else's house, naturally, the computer that I was using would not be inside. In fact, the very location where I first met Dina that I was thinking of was not here. As I was pondering as such, I heard footsteps ring out from behind me, followed by the sound of the voice that I was familiar with. Yes, it is correct. At least, the location is. I see, it seemed I had reached the correct answer. Once I turned to look behind me, I spotted Dina, who looked exactly the same as she previously did. She really hid in a troublesome location. Because of that, we ended up spending quite a lot of time trying to find her. She was smiling faintly and came to stand beside me. During this time, Bennett did not show any reaction whatsoever. Perhaps she was trying to assess the situation. This is an empty house. Approximately half a year from now, it will be bulldozed down, and half a year after that, in the year 2017, a family home that my lady is well familiar with will be built. 2017? Then right now, it's... Yep, it's the year 2016. And a year from now, a married couple and their child will move into the newly bought home. That young man will grow up to the age of 21 years old without even realizing who he really is. And in the year 2033, after being guided by the G.O.Disama, by me, his memory and ego will be brought over to Midgard. And right now, he's standing right next to me. After hearing Dina's words, Bennett's gaze greatly sharpened and glared at the two of us. Notwithstanding that, Dina continued to smile unfazed. Meanwhile, after hearing that explanation, I felt a sense of intrigue and understanding. There was no other way to think than I see, so that's how it was. No wonder this world did not make me feel nostalgic. In other words, it was that, In conclusion, it turned out that was the real Rupas Moffel who had a memory implanted into me. From the very start, there had never been two different egos within me. It was merely that I had lost my sense of self on my own and was playing the role of someone else. From the very beginning, I was the real Rupas who was playing the role of someone else. Who exactly is that young man? He is also you, Rupa-sama. To be more precise, he is similar in existence to me or Pollux-sama. I see. For every word that Dina spoke, I felt the sensation of a piece of the puzzle clicking in my head. Yes, that's right. The ident.I.tie behind was me myself. He was an avatar. Broadly speaking, avatars were divided into three different categories. A type created out of magical power, a type created out of divine power, and a type which made use of a human parent's womb. Rupa's was, no, let us stop describing her as someone different. In the past, out of those, I chose the third category. After imitating the technique of creating an avatar which the G.O.Dis had a monopoly on, I created an avatar of myself in a different world at a different reference point of time. The ego and the memories possessed by the avatar was then brought back to my real body by Dina, allowing me to obtain an independent and objective point of view that I originally did not have, which then gave me the opportunity to look back and assess myself. Now that it had come to this, I understood clearly. I could evaluate and state things precisely because I had the opportunity to review my past self from the position of someone else. Of course, it was only natural that I would be abased. Just by being able to see from that point of view, there was worth to the implanted ego and memory. By the way, what happened to that young man? He's perfectly fine. Although I copied his memories and ego, even after that event, he'll continue to live as normal, and eventually die normally from old age. Though, he will not realize who he really is until the very end. I see. Then that's fine. Also, just so you know, he'll continue to hug his parents' legs until he reaches 23 years old, at which point, he'll enter the workforce as a company worker and finally start to live by himself. No, you don't need to tell me that. With this, one of the weights on my shoulders had been lifted. It seemed that I had not ended up ruining anyone's livelihood. In the beginning, I thought that I had forcibly possessed Rupa's and had stolen her life. After that, I felt uneasy thinking that I had taken everything away from a young boy. However, because Rupa's was actually me, there was nothing for me to steal away from her. And now, I had found out that the young boy was able to become independent of me. With this, I was able to move on to the next topic while feeling assured. And assume you're going to tell me everything? The reason behind why we had to come all the way here. Of course. After all, there's no longer any reason for me to hide it. But before that, allow me to start by introducing myself. After saying that, Dina took out a business card from her chest pocket and handed it to me. After seeing the name which was written on top of it, I understood everything once again. Ah, I see, that was what I felt. I see, as expected, you were the one. I'm in possession of 3 names. One of them is my name as the G.O.Dis's avatar, Dina. One of them is my name as the 7 luminaries of the demon race, Venus. And then there's one more. She chuckled mischievously whilst Bennett, in response, crossed her arms in displeasure. Exactly, she was the very individual who had deceived everyone. She had deceived me. She had deceived the 12 heavenly stars. She had deceived the demons. And she had even proven that she could deceive the G.O.Dis herself, like a snake. She was that 13th person. One of the tyrannical 13 heavenly stars, Ophiuchus the Serpent Bearer. 5 That is the name my lady has bestowed upon me. Rupas and Dina to Ilu.s. Tration from Alba Light Novel Volume 7 __. Author note, late night television show, our ratings went up because of that incident. Great. Author note end, TLN, for those of you wondering, yes, Ophiuchus, the unofficial 13th zodiac constellation represented by the constellation Serpens, is a real thing. It is one of 13 constellations that cross the ecliptic, what tyrannical is based on, so it's sometimes called the 13th sign of the zodiac. But because you can't neatly divide the sky in 30 degrees angles if there are 13 constellations, it just doesn't get included. I'm sure there are deeper reasons, but I'm sleepy. Its symbol is Ophiuchus and it covers November 29th to December 17th. Ophiuchus, https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus, astrology https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ophiuchus_, astrology. Please read Notice 1 at the start of the chapter if you haven't already, thank you. Chapter 157, Specialty Trait, Miracle Skin Raw link, February 5, 2017, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, March 30, 2020, Editor 1, Hand of Vecna, April 13, 2020, Editor 2, Key, April 23, 2020, Translation link, __ Notice 1, Hi everyone, good news. I received a reply from the J-Novel Club and we will be continuing the translation of A Wild Last Boss Appeared. I hope you will ride along until the end of the series. My translation of chapters 17 to 19 has been removed from this blog. The new release date ETA has been posted on the side of the blog. The release date for the chapters 157 to 159 have been changed. The dates for chapters 160 and onwards are the same as they previously were. Chapters 156 to 160 are actually my favorite chapters of this series, so without further ado, I hope you enjoy chapter 157. Author note, in the previous chapter, I made a mistake in regard to so I made some corrections. There is no effect on the overall flow of the story. Author note end, TLN, I think we already have the amended version so we are not affected. Dina was the G.O.Dis's avatar, born from an elven father and a human mother. In regard to how many avatars there had been before her, even she did not know. In all likelihood, up until this point, each time was the same. The womb of a human who was already on land was borrowed and used to give birth to an avatar. When the previous generation passed away, a subsequent avatar would be born once more. Dina registered all previous generations of avatars as herself. Similarly, the G.O.Dis also considered all generations as herself. After all, the avatars were clones of the G.O.Dis, and as such, all of them were essentially the same person. Although she possessed the name Dina, given to her by her birth parents, that was nothing more than a name attached to the new body that she currently occupied. She thought nothing special of the name itself. As a consequence of all of this, she did not feel all that grateful for the parental love that she had received, nor did she have a sense of guilt for leaving her hometown behind without saying anything to anyone once she came of age. After all, she was the G.O.Dis's clone. To her, she had no parents. After leaving her hometown, she traveled around the world as the proxy of the G.O.Dis. At times, she said judgment upon and punished people, at times, she rewarded and blessed people. It was at this time. The time when she discovered the existence of Rupaz Mawful, who was gaining prominence in those recent years. Notwithstanding that she was just an adventurer, she was reenacting a story of a heroic tale which was not among the countless number of established G.O.Dis scenarios by going around and saving several countries. The list of magical beasts that she had defeated included even the likes of the renowned dragon King Loden. She might be considered a risk factor. After regarding Rupaz's existence as a risk, Dina infiltrated the kingdom which Rupaz had founded and used mind manipulation on the people to make sure that her existence was not detected. On the off chance that she mped into someone and was temporarily detected, she also implanted a fake memory which made people think that she was an advisor in order to avoid suspicion. With this, she roamed around the Mawful Tower just as if she was some kind of background object and successfully undertook the extremely bold and daring activity of observing Rupaz Mawful from close by. After observing Rupaz in this way, Dina reached a single conclusion. This woman was extremely dangerous. Way too dangerous. So dangerous that if she was left alone to her own devices, there was a risk of her overturning the very foundation of the G.O.Dis scenario. Dina thus thought of eliminating her. However, the more that Dina observed her, the more that she was made to understand how much of an impossibility doing that was. As a clone of the G.O.Dis, she had power equivalent to a level 1000. She also possessed various special skills in her position as the representative of the G.O.Dis. Yet even then, she could not imagine herself winning against Rupa's Maffel. Irrespective of whether she was to use memory manipulation, perception manipulation, arcane magic, divine magic, or even a power which went beyond the concept of time to delete the enemy's existence, she did not think it would be effective. As the stand-in for the G.O.Dis, Dina's power should have been absolute. At the very least, even if she was against the likes of Alioth or Migraz, whilst she might fall behind a little in pure battle prowess, she still had sufficient cheat-like power to come out victorious unconditionally. But in the end, all of that was strength which was permitted and operated under the specification of the G.O.Dis's rules. She was only peerless and invincible because others also operated within those rules. As such, if she was to be against Rupas who operated whilst disregarding those rules and restrictions, her invincibility was not invincible enough. The only way is to move the Ouroboroses, but there. As a last resort, Dina had access to the most powerful unique skill. The name of the skill was Rasselhug.1. The effect of the skill was to activate all the Ouroboroses simultaneously. Exactly. As the stand-in for the G.O.Dis, she had the ability to wake the Ouroboroses. Not only that, after waking them up, she had the authority to give orders to them. However, to do so signified destroying Midgard. Once done, there was no going back. Just by moving, the Ouroboroses would deal fatal damage to Midgard. As such, even for the G.O.Dis, it was a last resort. If possible, she did not want to take such an action. Thus, she wondered if there were any other options available. It happened during one of those days when she was pondering that question. Dina overheard the words of Rupas and Migraz, who were discussing their course of action for the future. Those words invited the slightest disturbance into Dina's psyche. So there's an outbreak of an epidemic at an elven settlement in the east, huh? We may need to do something about it. It was just the slightest bit of agitation. It was truly just the slightest disturbance. It was such a small effect that even Dina herself was unable to understand why she was feeling what she felt. But at that very moment, Rupas directed her sight towards Dina's direction and their eyes met. She's looking at me? No, that's impossible. My perception manipulation should be perfect. Even if I somehow appear in a person's vision, they should register me as an advisor, forget about me and move on. What's wrong, Rupas? No, it's nothing. Let's leave it at this today. You guys go ahead, I'll follow shortly. All right, sure thing. After immediately s.h.i+fting her line of sight away from Dina, Rupas sent Migraz out of the room first, then closed the door behind him. She then turned back to look towards Dina and prompted a question. Since when have you been standing there? She was busted. After realizing that fact, Dina's heart jumped in surprise. How is that possible? It's impossible. No, it has to be impossible. After losing her composure, Dina subconsciously stopped moving for a moment. Furthermore, due to this pause, her chance to flee the scene was s.n.a.t.c. head away from her. By the time Dina came to, Rupas, who had already closed the distance between them, placed her hands on the wall as if to prevent her from getting away and was staring down into her eyes. You don't look like someone of the demon race, huh? You. Who exactly are you? I'm. Dina was momentarily lost for words. At that very moment, the thought that flashed within her head was of the warmth and smiles that she had received from her parents. The ones who treated her not as the G.O.Dis's clone but instead as an individual known as Dina, and poured their love out for her. Why? Why was it that, at this very moment, she was recalling those memories? She should have thrown them away. Along with the name Dina, she should have thrown away the parents who had given birth to her current body. Was she fearing death at this moment? Was she being fearful that she would never be able to meet them again? That can't be. Death was not something to be feared. After all, she was the G.O.Dis's clone. Even if she was to be killed right here and then, her next self would be born. Even if she was to be killed, it would just mean that one more avatar became unusable. There was no concept of death for her. After telling herself that, a smile crept up on her face like it was plastered on. Allow me to introduce myself, Rapaz Mafal. My name is Alovenus. The creation G.O.Dis, Alovenus. Although, this body is just an avatar. Is that so? You did well in noticing my presence. I thought I had hidden myself quite well. Donning a sneering mask on her face, she feigned complacency and composure. If you want to kill me, then go ahead and kill. If you do so, the next avatar will be born immediately afterwards and begin taking action. Yet, Rapaz did not take any action. She merely looked at Dina with great interest. I only noticed just now. Just for a brief moment, your emotions wavered, allowing me to see through your concealment. Is there something at this elven settlement? No, there is nothing. Really, now? I don't believe it's completely unrelated to you being a half-elf though. After Rapaz replied as such, she touched one of Dina's ears. Due to this sudden physical contact, Dina's shoulder instinctively trembled. On the outside, you look just the same as every other human, but if you touch your ears, you can feel the slightly pointed tips. Not only that, but your cartilage also has a slightly different strength to it. Unlike humans, elves have a more distinct quantiness in their ears and, in support of that, their joints and cartilage are stronger than that of humans. It seems that this feature is inherited even by half-elves. Also, elves' ears are more sensitive because they have more nerves running through them. Why, you're well informed. One of my close friends is an elf, you see. After playing around with his ears a few times, I noticed the difference in joints and cartilages. After all of this, Rapaz removed her fingers from Dina's ears. However, her body was still in the same position. From the look of things, it seemed that Rapaz had no intention of letting Dina go. In the meantime, Dina was looking for any favorable opportunities but was unable to find any chances to make an escape. Your agitation must have been because of the epidemic, huh? Do you have an acquaintance in that settlement? Do you want me to take a guess? In all likelihood, one of your parents, if not the both of them, is in that settlement, correct? Tisk. Dina tended not to show her emotions on her face, but even then, for the briefest moment, she was unable to successfully hide the disturbance in her heart. Rapaz was able to detect this disturbance with her sharp awareness, allowing her to be convinced that what she had just said was correct. Your face is asking why. Well, it's nothing complicated really. You called yourself an avatar, did you not? But you're not made out of arcane or divine power. Which means that there have to be parents who gave birth to you. After knowing that much, even I can have a shot at figuring things out. Although, once Rapaz got to this point, she looked at Dina with a slightly surprised face. For you to be agitated after hearing about your parents, that's quite a human reaction, no? Could it be that even the G.O.Dis has the ability to feel grateful? Or is it that, you're actually a separate N.I.T from the G.O.Dis herself? What kind of stupid thing? It's not particularly a strange thing now, is it? Even factoring in that you have the memories and the ego of the G.O.Dis, from the very moment that you were born, you're a separate N.I.T who underwent a different path and experience in life. Your parents are not the parents of the G.O.Dis. They love you, not the G.O.Dis. The things that you've experienced as yourself is your experience and not the experience of the G.O.Dis. With all that, you're already a different N.I.T, no. What Rapaz was saying was not incorrect. However similar they seemed to be, the G.O.Dis herself and her avatars were different. From the moment that they began to tread different paths, they were no longer the same N.I.T. For example, say there was a body without a will and the G.O.Dis possessed that body in order to remotely control it. In those cases, indeed, it could be considered the G.O.Dis herself. But that was not what was happening. Due to how powerful of an existence she was, the G.O.Dis was unable to see the finer details throughout the world. Which was why she created the avatars. So that she could use the information from those avatars to observe the details of the world. That was the reason the avatars were given free will of their own, and at times, they thought differently from the G.O.Dis herself. At the very least, if she was the G.O.Dis herself, she would not have felt any concern for Dina's parents. The G.O.Dis most likely would not even have remembered their names or faces and would have simply registered them as one of many elves that each had the same appearance. What is your name? I named myself just then, didn't I? No, you haven't named yourself. You're not the G.O.Dis, after all. You have it right? Your real name. It's not my real name. It's merely a fake name given to this body. You're pretty stubborn, aren't you? Ruppaz smiled bitterly and, for some reason, took out a vial from her pocket and pushed it onto Dina. What Ruppaz gave Dina was a medicine she had jointly developed with Megrez known as an elixir. Not only could the elixir cure any illness, it could also increase the lifespan of the consumer. As this amazing product seemed like it was directly picking a fight with the G.O.Dis, Dina did not see it very favorably. Hold on to that and go where you wish to go the most right now. Are you telling me you'll let me go free? A bit complacent, don't you think? Well, even if we continue to speak as we are, we're not getting anywhere anyways. I'm expecting that the next time we meet, I'll be speaking to the real you and not the G.O.Dis's avatar. I doubt there'll be a next time though. Dina gloated and then disappeared from the place. Now that she had been found out once, the same approach was unlikely to work again. She had to think of another way to observe her target. The next time she was caught, she would most likely be eliminated. Utilizing the X-gate, Dina left the tower behind. Then, she looked around at her surroundings and was shocked. It was because the location which she had just landed on was the elven settlement where she was born. She had come to this location subconsciously. How could I have done something so stupid, even though I don't care what happens to them? She instinctively mocked herself for what she just did, yet her feet did not take her away from the location. All she had to do was leave the place. All she had to do was use X-gate one more time and leave the place. Although that was all there was to it, she was painfully reluctant to do so. She was unable to leave this place. What is this? Did I get infected by emotions or something? All I'm doing is checking what's going on. I'm simply curious, that's all. After making an excuse for herself, Dina took a step into the forest. No doubt, they're going to lecture me again. They're going to ask me what I'm doing here and why I'm finally bothering to show my face so late in time. And that's fine. If anything, I'd rather that be the case. It was because if that was how things developed, she would be able to cut off her lingering attachments. Right after she had such thoughts, another question came into her head. Lingering attachments? What do I mean by lingering attachments? How stupid. There's no way I'd have any of them. I mean, I'm the G.O.Dis's clone. Eventually, she finally reached deep into the forest. And what Dina ended up seeing was the appearance of her withered father, who was all worn out from the illness, and the tomb of her mother, who had already passed away from this world. Author note, the truth is, this background san was actually being a background. There is nothing strange about it. Author note end, Ruppaz and Dina 3ilu.s. Tration from Alba Light Novel Volume 7 __1 Alpha Afiyuki aka Rasselhog, https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/alpha_Afiyuki. Alpha Afiyuki is a binary star and the brightest star in the constellation of Ophiuchus. Chapter 158, Dina used secret power, 1 raw link, February 11, 2017, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, April 9, 2020, Editor 1, Hand of Vecna, April 18, 2020, Editor 2, Key, May 1, 2020, translation link, ____________. By the time Dina reached her hometown, it was already on the verge of destruction. Her human mother had already long reached the end of her lifespan and passed away, and her father looked like nothing but the skin on top of his bones. No, it was not just her father. At this point, Dina's hometown had turned into nothing but a prison full of people who were just moments before their deaths. Her heart wouldn't be moved, or so should have been the case. She had thought that she would not feel anything even if she saw what was happening. She was the G.O.Dis's avatar who just so happened to be born in this village. Thus, she should not have had any sentimental feelings towards these people. But why? Why was it that she was feeling this agitated? Why could she feel a chill running down her spine? Why did her feet tremble as if there were ice cubes sliding down her back? Up until this moment, she had observed scenes like this many times. Although she did not directly play her hand in them due to her overwhelmingly powerful existence, she had ordered the Moon Ouroboros to create a scene like this over and over again. There were times when the population of the world had gotten way too large and she had reduced their numbers. There were even times when she had completely erased an entire species. Really? Were those things really done by her? Those were the things the G.O.Dis did. And, isn't it that I've never really personally seen a scene like this ever before? Oh, Dina, thanks for coming back again. She must have instinctively gotten close to the bed that her father was sleeping in before she became aware of how close she was. Notwithstanding that it had been about 100 years since she had left the village, her father noticed the appearance of his daughter in a flash and reached out one of his worn-out and almost skeletal hands towards her direction. Before she even noticed, she had grabbed his hand, then became mute and dumbfounded from realizing how weak it was. A person would eventually die. They would die and leave this world. Even the long-lived elves were not an exception to this rule. She was aware of this from the very start. Yet, within Dina, there were feelings of dread and dismay as if she had found out this rule for the first time ever. Why was it that her heart was feeling so painful despite her mother being nothing more than a sage way to bring herself, the Avatar, into this world? Why was it that her heart was feeling so painful despite her father being someone whose existence she did not even recognize until she saw him in such a weak condition? Why was it that the memories of when the two of them showered her with loving smiles were overflowing into her this late in time? She should have been the personification of the G.O.Dis. As such, the deaths of one or two living individuals should not have been able to move her heart this much. Until this moment, she had never questioned the equation, the G.O.Dis equals myself. But now, for the first time, that equation fell apart. She could not help but feel that there was an insurmountable wall standing between herself and the G.O.Dis. It was because she just could not believe in any shape or form that her real body, the G.O.Dis, would be feeling the same pain that she was currently feeling. In all likelihood, the G.O.Dis would not even remember her father's face nor his name. She would not even feel like remembering it, and, even if her father was left to die, she would have nothing more than a sing thought along the lines of, oh, the Avatar's elven father died. Father. Dina Krylu.s. From Alba Light Novel V7. She had not thought of him as her father. She had thought of him as nothing more than one of the many individuals who walked on Midgard. But was that really the case? The loving smiles directed at her. The warm love that she had received from her parents. In truth, did she not feel comfortable and at home when she was with them? In truth, did she not indeed accept the warmth and loving care afforded to her? Did she not feel happiness when she was with them? Was it not merely due to her forcibly shutting her eyes and feigning willful ignorance as a result of her pride and conceit in believing herself to be the G.O.Dis? I don't know. I don't know who I am. Because I'm the avatar of the G.O.Dis who walks on Midgard. I'm supposed to be the manifestation of the G.O.Dis herself but if that's not the case, then, who exactly am I? What flashed across Dina's mind was the image of a foolish doll who merely mimicked the G.O.Dis. There were strings attached to the limbs of that doll, and the real G.O.Dis herself was controlling and playing around with that doll from an ever-high position. Dina could not help but imagine such a scene. Dina strongly placed her hands over the clothing on top of her chest as if she were trying to hold down her painful heart. When she did, she felt something hard there. When she took it out to see what it was, she realized that it was the vial of elixir which had been forced onto her by Rupas. It was a forbidden medicine which could cure any illness and even increase the lifespan of a person. As it was a product which figuratively spat on the G.O.Dis, Dina had planned to smash it to pieces later. But right now, for some reason, she could not come to shatter it anymore. She did not know whether to use it or throw it away. She was just standing in place, lost as to what she wanted to do herself. But at that moment, her sharp sense of hearing detected something and the color of her face changed. Something is coming, something big and dangerous is coming to this village. There was a sound which was loud enough to shake the earth. And the sound of trees being snapped and knocked down. After jumping out of the house in a fluid U.S.tur, what Dina saw was a giant black scorpion monster which was closing in on her position whilst sweeping away the buildings in its way. The Queen of Poison. The Emperor Berserk Scorpion? The Emperor Berserk Scorpion. Amongst the countless number of scorpion-type monsters, it was known to be the strongest of its kind and was classified as a catastrophe-level magical beast. Within its body, it contained any and all kinds of poisonous concoctions which existed in the world. It was designated as an extremely dangerous species as, if the monster felt like it, it could cover the whole planet in its poison within a mere few days and turn it into a dead and lifeless planet. Within history, these kinds of monsters had actually appeared a few times. The purpose behind these monsters was to cull down living things who had grown too numerous in number. Living things were left to flourish as long as the ecosystem was not destroyed. However, once the G.O.dis determined that the balance of the world had collapsed, these monsters would appear. These monsters would then concoct a kind of poison that the target living creatures did not possess the antibodies of, right on the spot, and spread an epidemic, driving them into extinction. In other words, they were walking pestilences themselves too. Its battle prowess was level 900. Although it was a little lacking when compared to the world's arbitrators, like the Lion King and the Dragon King, it did not change the fact that these monsters were extremely dangerous. The emergence of these catastrophe-level magical beasts equated to the extinction, or at the very least, decline, of some species. Even to this date, they served as a feared calamity which could not be handled and would continue to assault and terrorize the humanoids. That was the true nature of the epidemic which was treading upon this village. Why? Sure, the elves have been growing in number lately, but it's still not the time for something like that to move yet. So why is something like that? And at this village? While staring at the Queen of the Scorpions, Dina desperately worked her brain. The elves were one of the G.O.dis's favorite species. Furthermore, the number of elves were not that high by any means. There was no special reason for something like that to come to this village. If anything, it should have been facing the humans, which were currently growing with Ma.S.Civ momentum. So why, 3 could it be? There was one thing that came to her mind. And that was her very existence. As the avatar of the G.O.dis, going forward, there would be times where she would have to name herself as the G.O.dis and appear before the people. As a matter of fact, the best and most efficient way to remove the existence known as Ruppas was to utilize the name of the G.O.dis and declare Ruppas as evil and incite the people. However, if such a time were to come and it was revealed that the one calling herself the G.O.dis was known to have been born amongst one of those people, then others would become doubtful. She might be considered a charlatan who called herself the G.O.dis. But there was one simple solution to that problem. There would not be any problems if the ones who knew of that fact were no longer in this world. Dina thought the use of memory manipulation would have been sufficient. But the one who had moved this scorpion must have considered it insufficient and wanted to be absolutely sure. Precisely. The avatar and the real body, which should have originally been the same person, had a different take on the matter. It just so happened that such a troublesome thing resulted in such an outcome. The Queen of Poison opened its mouth, and at the same time, Dina instinctively reacted at a comparable speed. Tisk. Heed me, time. Dina quickly activated a unique skill, trapping the Queen of Poison in a prison of time. The unique skill Yed Posterior. For it was a skill used to control time. A set period of the target's time would be cut away and removed, causing the enemy's movement itself to elongate over the cut period. It was an extraordinary skill only usable because she was the proxy of the G.O.dis. It was an absolute skill with an unfair effect. Not only that, this skill's effect only became more potent the more time the target was placed under. Eventually, not only would the target's time stop completely, it would go beyond that, and tread into the negative territory. The target's time itself would revert and rewind back into the past. It was such that Dina could even revert them back to the moment before they were born. Similarly, Dina also possessed a unique skill which allowed her to speed up the flow of time. The commonality shared between these two skills was that they could not be prevented. Her special unique skills had an effect whereby, when it was used, it took absolute priority over all others that were in place. Although people around the world were not aware of it, there were priorities attached to every given skill. For example, where two skills, one with absolute accuracy and another with absolute evasion, were to be pitted against each other, the skill with the higher priority would be given precedence. There were 5 levels of priority. Typically, the higher the rank of the skill, the higher the priority it had. However, the priority level of unique skills used by the agents of the G.O.DIS, such as Dina and the Ouroboroses, was 6. In other words, those skills would successfully and unconditionally take effect, and absolutely could not be offset or negated by any means possible. It meant that once the skill was used, it would be perfectly established with absolute certainty. The significance of these absolute priority skills was proof that the user was a proxy of the G.O.DIS. The movements of the Queen of Poison dulled before Dina's eyes, becoming extremely slowed down. However, the poison mist had already been fired from her mouth. Those mists were ever so slowly, but definitely, making their way out of the prison of time. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Irrespective of how well the Queen of Poison's real body's movement was restricted, if the poison mist were to escape out of the prison of time, then there were no hands left to be played. At that very moment, the Queen of Poison's speed was reduced down to 100,000th of her original speed. For most living things, this much deceleration was as good as stopping their time. However, it was still moving. It had not yet stopped. In other words, its original scattering speed was just simply that stupidly fast. The flow of the time continued to get slower and slower. By now, the Queen of Poison was almost unable to move at all. Nevertheless, before its time could be stopped completely, the poison mist would leak out of the prison of time first. As the avatar of the G.O.DIS, Dina possessed 7 unique skills. All of them had their priority levels A.S. signed as 6 and would take precedence over any other skill. But amongst those skills, none had an effect that was able to resolve this current problem. What should I do? What can I do? Once the poison mists leaked out, she might be able to bear with it for a while. However, the people in this village would die. At the very least, her father, who was already on his deathbed, definitely would not survive. Furthermore, once the poison had been sprayed all over the village, regardless of how many times she was to use resurrection divine magic, the ones resurrected would die again immediately afterwards. At this moment, Dina had even forgotten that she was the G.O.DIS's avatar, as she did nothing but desperately rack her brain trying to find any possible solution to avoid what was about to happen. However, a panic-driven brain in a mad rush for an answer would naturally not even be able to come up with the most obvious solution. Impatience gave birth to further impatience, ultimately robbing away any form of rational decision-making ability she would have had. And finally, it was the moment the poison mist had reached the edges of the prison of time and was about to cross over. The effect of your skill is absurdly powerful, but the way you're utilizing it is horrendous. I guess it's because you have access to overpowered skills that you can't think of a way to pragmatically resolve the problem. Look here. Something like this can be resolved in a much simpler way. Dina heard a voice overflowing with confidence from her side. In the next moment, she saw a clenched fist come into her peripheral vision. The owner of the voice took a step and punched with all their might. That was all that they did. Nevertheless, the resulting outcome of that was beyond Dina's imaginations. With just a single strike of their fist, an enormous tornado which reached the ends of the sky was created, blowing away all the poison mists high up into the air. The Queen of Poison was ever so slightly caught up by this tornado and was also sent high up into the air. As a result of its weight, it barely managed to avoid getting sent out of the stratosphere, but as it was falling back down, Rapaz clenched her fist once again and took aim at it. You also seem to be under some lame control. Whatever, You'll probably wake up from being punched. I'll hold back, but I'll punch with all I have. Ready. What a contradicting sentence it was. How would one punch with all they had even whilst holding back? It did not even make any sense. But this was a world where such an illogical thing could be established. And it was the existence of skills which made it possible. At that moment, Dina definitely felt something. The presence that she felt from Ruppas skyrocketed at an overwhelming degree, and of the fact that even the level restriction in place had been overcome. Ordinarily, observing eyes could not be used to measure the values of an individual which was stronger than the user. However, Dina was the G.O.Dis's avatar. She was able to disregard that condition and determine Ruppas's level. After seeing that it was a ridiculous number exceeding 4,000, Dina almost fainted. The level cap served as a wall in place against how much destruction could be caused. So that power that was too strong would not destroy the world, the might of an attack was forcibly brought down to a specified cap upon impact. It was a defensive mechanism that had been set in place. Had such a system not been in place, just by a person moving beyond the speed of sound, there would be serious collateral damage done to the surroundings as a result of the sonic boom. Similarly, if a person were to move beyond the speed of light, the world would perish. Furthermore, there was more than one wall in place. As a precaution, beginning at level 1000, at a set interval of 1000 levels, there were 10 layers of restrictive walls in place. In other words, there was a restrictive wall at level 2000, 3000, and so on and so forth. And right now, Ruppas's level was over 4000. She had already overcome 4 restrictive walls which were in place. In her current state, the maximum damage which could be dealt was 999. It would be possible for her to deal almost 1 billion damage per hit. In that condition, the skill Blunt Edge Strike was activated. After activating the special holding back skill, which would definitely leave the enemy at 1 HP, Ruppas punched the Queen of Poison with all her might, sending her away. This time for sure, the giant body with a length reaching 100 m was sent flying out of the stratosphere, eventually closing into where the sun was. The Blunt Edge Strike prevented the opponent from dying as a result of the damage dealt by the user. However, the opponent could still die as a result of damage from outside factors. In other words, if the Queen of Poison continued to plunge into the sun in its current condition, it would not be able to survive. Nevertheless, Ruppas had already caught up to where the Queen was, and turned her around with a kick. After this, Ruppas was joking around at a tavern with her comrades whilst saying as expected, the sun was actually pretty hot. Again, using with the effect of Blunt Edge Strike, Ruppas kicked the Queen, who was already at 1 HP, vertically down into Midgard. She again overtook the Queen who was falling down like a shooting star and stopped in a standby position in the sky slightly above the village. She then stopped the Queen who fell right down onto her with one hand, finally slowly landing back down onto the ground. The total time that elapsed whilst all of this was happening, was merely about 1 second. Dina's jaw, which had dropped down, did not close. Author note, let's inspect Dina's unique skills. Note, a few of these are just to let you know what they are, and there is a possibility that they may not play a role in the storyline. Rasselhog 6 It was next to the pillow again today. A part of my body. But once out, it's no longer a part of my body. When I turned on the television, an empty-headed personality was using it as a joke. They were talking about hair again. Of course, that's not the case. It is a skill that simultaneously wakes and commands the Ouroboroses. It has the priority rank 6, and as such, it takes precedence over every other skill. It cannot be negated by any means. Sibalray 7 manipulates the target's memory, and implants fake memories. Furthermore, by manipulating their recognition, the user is able to make the target perceive them as air or a rock, thus making them unable to feel their presence. It has the priority rank 6, and as such, it takes precedence over every other skill. It cannot be negated by any means, or so it was meant to be. Mulefin 8 To use Fenbren to beat the first volume, it's impossible and, of course, that's not the case. 9 This skill can assign a maximum damage restriction on the target. It is able to drop their maximum damage down to 9,999. It has the priority rank 6, and as such, it takes precedence over every other skill. It cannot be negated by any means. Yed Prior 10 separates the target's time from the surroundings and allows it to be sped up infinitely without an upper limit. Eventually, the target of this skill can be sped up such that they transcend past the limit and concept of time itself. Although, that's A.S. Summing their physical body even manages to bear the effect. It has the priority rank 6, and as such, it takes precedence over every other skill. It cannot be negated by any means. Yed Posterior 11 separates the target's time from their surroundings and allows them to be decelerated infinitely without limit. Eventually, the target of this skill will be slowed down such that their time will stop. Their time will then flow backwards until before they were born, effectively being erased completely. It has the priority rank 6, and as such, it takes precedence over every other skill. It cannot be negated by any means. Sabik 12, a skill that creates skills. However, this does not mean that it can create any skill whatsoever on a whim. There are 100 points that can be distributed out during the creation of a skill. For example, if the power of the skill is raised too much, it may end up as an extremely destructive skill but possesses a terrible accuracy rate, or end up as a skill with no special effect. Alternatively, if you evenly distribute points to those effects, there will be less A.S. Signable points to power. Additionally, if the previously made skill still remains in place, Sabik cannot be used to create another skill. If Dina wants to create a new skill, she will need to get rid of the previously created skill. This is nothing more than a handy jack-of-all-trades skill to do what the user wants by disregarding A.S. signing points into power and focusing entirely on accuracy and special effects, or so Dina took it to be. Marfic 13 allows the G.O.Dis to possess the body, skyrocketing all stats by multiple times. When this skill is used, Dina would, in a very literal sense, become the G.O.Dis's avatar. Her consciousness will be erased. This skill can be activated by the G.O.Dis, regardless of Dina's will. It has the priority rank 6, and as such, it takes precedence over every other skill. It cannot be negated by any means. Star of Asclepius 14, the most powerful recovery skill within the water attribute. Able to heal all kinds of wounds. It can even resurrect the dead. Technically, this is not a unique skill. However, because it is a legendary skill that no one else can use, it is essentially Dina's exclusive magic. SUBSP.A.CE Seal 15 abandons the target in the S.P.A.CE between dimensions. Account ban. Technically, this is also not an exclusive skill. Super Kitchen Ability 16. The other 12 stars may be at a cheat tier, but Dina is, in a literal sense, the very embodiment of cheat. The others may possess balance-destroying skills that are unfair or cheat-like. However, Dina uses actual fraudulent skills and essentially truly cheats her way through. Also, it's worth noting that Rupaz's Mirror Punch is more dangerous than any of these. All you gotta do is raise your level and punch your way through. Chapter 159, Xgate Online used Explosion, 1 raw link, February 12, 2017, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, April 26, 2020, Editor 1, Hand of Vecna, May 2, 2020, Editor 2, Key, May 4, 2020, Translation link, __ Notice 1. This chapter is being released 2 days ahead of schedule because I will be away for the next few days with my mid-semester exam. The ETA for chapter 160 is May 12th. There is also a chance that it may be delayed to May 13th because I am away until halfway through the 12th, and I may not be able to release the chapter in time. After that, it will go back to Vecna. __ Author note. I moved the core content from the previous chapter into this chapter as I was too hasty with hinting at Dina's role. Author note end, __ the Elven village survived. Correction, it was saved. Afterwards, by distributing the elixirs around, the people who were ill were cured and Dina's father managed to regain his health. Additionally, the scorpion became attached to Rupaz and, after changing into a humanoid form, glued herself onto Rupaz's arm. Dina had a strange feeling thinking about how the scorpion had managed to become attached to Ruppas despite how violently it had been punched by her. But then again, the true nature of the scorpion was a magical beast, after all. Perhaps it was attracted to the power that had overwhelmed her so much to the point where she was unable to retaliate against it. But Dina did not have the leisure to be paying attention to such things. That was because she was going through an existential crisis after what she had believed to be her identity had completely collapsed. She did not have room to be thinking about anything else. She had been keeping a close watch on Ruppas, believing her to be a risk factor, yet she was helped out by her. In contrast, she could not help but admit that the G.O.Dis, whom she had believed to be the same N.I.T as herself up until this point, and her actual self had a fatal misalignment in their thought processes. Now that things had gotten this far, she was convinced. No, she could not help but be convinced of the fact that she was not the same N.I.T as the G.O.Dis. She was merely a separate individual who had inherited the G.O.Dis's memories and ego. She was just a doll. At the very least, from the moment when the G.O.Dis tried to kill Dina's birth father and Dina tried to prevent that, the two of them had trodden upon completely separate paths. However, in that case, who exactly was she? What exactly was she? Whilst Dina was pondering such questions, her father, who was still resting on the ground, softly spoke with a weak voice. "Ah, Dina, you're still safe, good, good." Something warm flowed out from her eyes. She had thrown her mother away, thrown her father away, thrown her village away and left them all behind without a word. Because of her assumption that she was the incarnation of the G.O.Dis, she looked down on them. So much so that, even in regard to her mother's death, she had just learned of the fact. Notwithstanding all of that, he was still the same. He still unconditionally loved that daughter of his. He still worried and cared for her. Yeah, that's right. Didn't he always call her that in the past? From the first moment that she had been born, he had always called her that. Not Alovenus, the borrowed name of someone else, but Dina. Now, she understood. Now, she noticed that she was not Alovenus. Irrespective of the fact that she had inherited a part of the G.O.Dis's spirit, irrespective of the fact that she had been conferred her memories and ego, she was still different. She could never consider herself as Alovenus ever again. After all, she loved them this much. She felt this much joy after finding out that he had been saved. This feeling was hers alone. It was not the G.O.Dis's. On that day, the young girl who should have been the G.O.Dis's avatar ceased to become her avatar. She turned from an avatar into a young girl, an individual by the name of Dina. Dina Krylu.s. Tration from Albolite novel V7, used it last chapter but it might be from this scene instead, asterisk. By the looks of it, it's checkmate. It seems we were a little too slow in noticing it. A few years later, the black-winged ruler who had taken hold of essentially the entire world could be seen with her secret advisor who closely followed her like her own shadow. The tyrannical 13 heavenly stars Ophiuchus. That was the alias bestowed upon Dina. Using her unique skill, she thinned her presence as if she was a shadow. Using perception manipulation, she made it so that even her own allies could not detect her existence. Her presence itself was completely erased from the minds of others as if she was blending into the very background. Amongst the 12 stars, only Taurus, Parthenos, and Aquarius were aware that a 13th star actually existed. And even for them, they did not know that her name was Dina. They could only barely sense that there was an enigmatic 13th star known as Ophiuchus, whose appearance they did not even know. It isn't a checkmate yet. If it's you, it should very well be possible to completely turn the tables around and start all over again. Right now, the two of them were being cornered. It would not be wrong to say that they were facing a crisis the likes of which they had never faced before. After concluding that the Demon King would not be able to handle Ruppas, the G.O.Dis manipulated Alioth and the rest by amplifying the insecurities and envy that they felt towards Ruppas, inducing them to feel antagonistic towards her. Furthermore, even amongst the countless number of subordinates who followed her, over half of them had turned against her. Those subordinates who had a strong loyalty towards her or those possessing strong mental strength were still on her side, but if there was a confrontation, it was clear which side would come out victorious, at least, under normal circumstances. But Rupes was not normal at all. Even if she was alone, she could overturn this unfavorable situation. Dina had just pointed this out. However, Rupes's expression did not improve. Yeah, it's possible. But you know, Ophiuchus, even assuming that I end up winning, what would happen then? Who exactly in their right minds do you think would end up following a ruler who sacres her own friends and allies? After all, a ruler who kills over half of her own subordinates is nothing but a tyrant. No one would recognize that individual. On top of that, once I do end up killing a lot of my allies and subordinates, even if I were to come out victorious, there'll be nothing left in my hands. Whether I win or not, I'll only end up losing everything. From the moment it had gotten to this point, it was my loss. Victory could be achieved. If it was only victory, it could be achieved. However, to make that come to fruition, she would lose her friends, have to burn down the country that she had needed to protect with her own hands and have to sacre her own people. And that was essentially no different from defeat. At the very least, the 12 stars will be left. And myself. You're right. I guess that's the only silver lining. In response to Dina's words, Rupes showed a faint smile. Rupes collected her thoughts a little. Then, once she had composed her thoughts, she raised her head. Looks like there's no other way but to think of a way to lose. A way to lose, did you say? Yeah. If what the people desire is for me to step down as ruler, then I shall answer by granting that to them. I will stage my own loss and investigate the one who caused all of that to happen in the meantime. That's. For you, it will most likely be a painful and audacious road. If you want to defect from me, now is the perfect time, you know. Even if she were to leave, she would not be blamed. The king was hinting this to her. However, in response, Dina merely smiled courageously. No thank you, Rupes-sama. I have no intention of going back to being a doll. Until I met you, I was nothing more than a doll that didn't possess an ego of my own. You were the one who turned me into me. In return for that, I'll fool even the G.O.Disama herself. Rupes and Dina illustration from Albolite novel V7. She was adept at fooling people. After all, from the moment she had been born, she had been fooling people. So she'd prove that she could do it. She would successfully deceive the demons. She would successfully deceive the 12 heavenly stars. She would successfully deceive the 7 heroes. She would successfully deceive Rupes. And she would prove that she could even successfully deceive the G.O.Dis herself. While slithering like a snake, she would prove that she could stir up every single faction from the inside, bringing about disorder and mayhem. If, at the end of all of that, even if she would have to suffer from hate and disgust from her allies, even if she would have to bear the T.I.Tle of a traitor, she would not hesitate. She would let the G.O.Dis know. This is me. This is the woman known as Dina. The serpent bearer. What cruel irony it was for her master to bestow upon her such a T.I.Tle. If anything, her master, who had created the forbidden fruit and pulled down all those who followed the G.O.Dis onto earth only for her to add them into her own camp, was the real snake. In the truest sense, she was the king of devils who appeared in legends and myths. But she was the serpent bearer. As such, she would have to lead even that very snake by the nose and reach the truth behind it all. All right. Then in that case, what you should do is. A few weeks later. Dina was mixed amongst the traitors' camp. She stood on the side of the 7 heroes who had rebelled against Rupes and looked for a suitable target while moving around like a shadow. Eventually, the individual that she found was a young elf. Seeing him. S.H.I. veering on the ground, not even able to stand up after having experienced Rupes's coercion, Dina smiled. Excuse me for looking through your memories. I see. You have some connections with the royal family, Not too bad as a target, I suppose. Dina walked towards the young man who was S.H.I+ veering on the ground and manipulated his memories and perception. Dina amplified his fear that he felt towards Rupaz, coaxing him to run away from the location. Additionally, she implanted a single order, deep in his subconsciousness. And that order was to be carried out 200 years from now. At that time, to oppose the threat of the Demon King, he would have no choice but to summon a hero. She implanted such a belief in him. Incidentally, she also bestowed him with the knowledge of how to use the skill X-Gate. Moreover, she presented him with various pieces of knowledge and taught him how to use a few arcane magic spells. She then incited him to become an executive officer in some kingdom in the future. In the battle which was about to occur, most of the high-level individuals would end up dead. As a consequence, even with his level of competence, given time, he should be able to become a central pillar in the country he ended up settling in. Furthermore, whilst bestowing him with the method of how to use X-Gate, she included a fatal fault. At the time they would attempt to summon a hero, instead of a person from another world, the summoning process would conclude a step prior. The method was rigged such that he would summon someone from the boundary between Midgard and another world. With all these steps in place, he would eventually try and summon a hero. And when he did, he would mistakenly call upon Rupaz. The one who would undertake the heavy responsibility of calling her master back to this world was this young man who seemed to have no redeeming features. Not even the G.O.Dis would be vigilant against someone like him. After preparing a ticking time bomb on a pitiful young man, Dina moved to the battlefield. She then applied her hand to end a certain battle which was already in its climax. At the same time Migrez tried to seal Rupaz with sealing arcane magic, she activated X-Gate. Subsequently, she sent Rupaz away to subs.p.a.ce. Needless to say, Rupaz was sent away without resistance. The prerequisite to X-Gate was the consent of the target, and because Rupaz had consented to this from the very beginning, there was no reason for her to not be sent away. With this, everyone else would think that the great heroes had defeated Rupaz. Magnificent. Truly magnificent, heroes. You have done well to prove to me that you can Serpa.s me. In the face of your courage and strength, I shall show my admiration from the bottom of my heart. But don't forget, the darkness has not yet lifted. With this much solidarity between your party, you may even strike the Demon King down. However, know that should you lose that solidarity of yours, the world will be enveloped in far more darkness than it ever has been. Whether your future shall turn out to be bright or dim, I shall observe it from the depths of H.E.L.L. Ka-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. Ha-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. Despite how exactly things were developing, Dina felt that Rupaz was in too high of a spirit. Could it be that she's actually really enjoying this last boss roleplay? Not to mention that she's even warning them that solidarity is important. Due to how frank Rupaz was being with all of this, Dina subconsciously leaked a weird chuckle. However, the fact that Dina was distracted by all of this was a problem. Feeling someone's gaze on her, she turned to look towards the source. When she did, her eyes met with Pollux's, who was firmly fixated on her. Os.H.I+T. This is definitely going to invite some misunderstandings. From Pollux's perspective, any woman who looked like a carbon copy of the G.O.Dis and smiled shrewdly after sealing Rupaz, was clearly suspicious. In all likelihood, even if Dina were to apply memory manipulation afterwards, Pollux was still likely to say something like, "She's suspicious." Dina became fluid U.S.tiered and quickly disappeared from the location, escaping from the battlefield. Although Dina had made a small mistake, looking at things holistically, things were going well. After leaving the battlefield behind, Dina headed to the S.P.A.ce between S.P.A.ce and reconvened with Rupaz. Rupaz-sama, what was that at the end? Because of you, I couldn't help but chuckle and ended up being seen by Pollux-sama. What are you doing? Of all people, you were seen by her. Hey, that's your fault, Rupaz-sama. It's because you were in such high spirits role-playing as the final boss. Well, no, I just felt joyful seeing everyone become strong. Alioth and the rest could not even have imagined what was happening. Who would have thought that, in the backstage of that fateful battle, there was such silly conversation going on? Ruppaz and Dina enjoyed a small quarrel with one another, before switching back to the main topic at hand. Anyways. Now, I'll wait for you to create an avatar. After you're done with that, I'll stop time and seal your real body in this subs.p.a.ce. The avatar that you create will be sent into the future to try and circuit the G.O.dis sama supervision. I'll think of some method to feed information and knowledge from this world to you. And 200 years from now, I'll match the time of the summoning in order to bring Ruppaz-sama back into this world. Is that alright with you? Yeah. By the way, is it possible to change the avatar's gender? Well, I suppose so. I mean, you're just implanting a fragment of your memories, ego, and soul, so it's possible, but are you planning to become a man? No, I'm just wondering. Now that Dina reflected on it, she thought that she should have pursued this topic a little more back then. How could Dina have predicted that Ruppaz would actually make a male avatar? As for why Ruppaz had chosen a male avatar, in all likelihood, it was probably because Ruppaz had wanted to objectively assess herself. Considering that she went as far as changing the avatar's gender, Dina thought that Ruppaz had, no doubt, wanted to completely become someone else so that she would be able to accurately observe and assess the deeds of Ruppaz-Mafal and determine why she ended up getting betrayed. Of course, Dina thought that Ruppaz may have had other reasons as well. For example, perhaps Ruppaz had wanted to make it harder for the G.O.dis to notice the avatar by changing its gender. Or perhaps she even wanted to try and prevent the avatar from becoming too much like Ruppaz by putting the avatar in a position as far away from how she was as possible. Alternatively, perhaps she just wanted to use this opportunity to try and understand how the minds of men worked. Whatever the reason, Ruppaz was a master whom she could not read. After their conversation, Dina extracted the fragment of Ruppaz's soul which would serve as the foundation for the avatar and stopped Ruppaz's time. Dina then traveled into the future, carrying that fragment with her before releasing that fragment. As long as that fragment was released and allowed to roam free, it would eventually house itself in some random fetus which had yet to be born. No further attention was required from Dina. After watching the fragment leave, Dina returned to the past once more. She then got around to laying down the necessary foundation so that she might properly provide that baby with the required information by the time it grew up. Once Dina returned to the original time, she utilized memory and perception manipulation and integrated herself into J.A.Pain's society, Establi.H.I plus Ngia company. And around the time when J.A.Pan entered the Heisei era, she developed a game with similar features to the world of Midgard 2 in the beginning. She started selling the offline prototype game X-Gate publicly. Then, without a moment of delay, she started creating the game X-Gate TRPG before completing the final product, X-Gate Online, which was as faithful to the systems which existed on Midgard as possible. There was no need for Dina to worry that Ruppaz's avatar would not play the game. After all, the avatar would subconsciously remember its original world. As such, the avatar would definitely be hooked onto the feel of the world. It should, no doubt, play the game with great interest. However, because this game was matched with the original world that Dina came from, there was an issue with the game's balance. As a consequence, the reputation of the game was a little, very bad on the internet. With how things were turning out, it was charging right into termination of its services. It looks like it can't be helped. Regardless of whatever happened afterwards, she had to first get the avatar to play the game. And for that to happen, the game had to be popular enough. As long as the avatar was aware of the game, Dina was sure that it would play it. However, if the game itself was too under the radar, there was a chance that the avatar would not even learn about its existence. As a result, Dina cheated. She created a commercial and endowed it with her perception manipulation skill, forcibly inciting people to be interested in the game and creating a game with fake popularity. This was the reason X-Gate Online was as popular as it was, despite the fact that the game balance was so bad that it was known as AS.H.I plus TTY game that was always moments before its services were shut down. After Dina ascertained that Ruppaz's avatar had properly started playing the game, the next thing Dina did was recreate a situation as close to reality as possible. Out of the countless players who played the game, Dina selected the players whose in-game avatars closely resembled the 7 heroes. She further picked out the ones amongst them who logged in more frequently and implicitly guided them. For example, those players might luckily acquire rare items which rarely dropped from monsters, or they might luckily encounter rare monsters which gave a high amount of experience points. Subsequently, after they were led to become top players in the game, they were awarded with special character names such as Alioth or Bennett Nash from the admins. In particular, for the would-be Alioth, he would be taught the existence of the hero CLA.S.S from an event quest that he coincidentally came across, as well as a way to obtain it. On top of all of this, she created a separate account for herself and mingled with the group Ruppas and the rest hung out with. She would then lead the conversation in the direction that she wanted and tried to incite them so that they would recreate historical events that she knew had happened. Such as, "It's boring if there's only one faction in the game, so let's split up and have a big battle." The reason such a ridiculous event that would have normally never happened even came to PAS.S in the first place was because the administrators had the game in their hands. After the fact, people wrote on the forum, "Things are going so smoothly, it's as if the admins are helping out certain players." It was exactly as they had said. The administrators were, in fact, helping out certain players in the game. After a while, Dina sensed a distortion in the S.P.A.C time continuum. In other words, Xgate was activated. When this happened, Dina electronically appeared in front of Ruppas's avatar as the mascot of the game, the creation G.O.Disalovenus, then said some stuff and teleported back to Midgard 3 in the process. She retrieved the fragment of Ruppas's soul from the avatar who was playing the game, then put him to sleep. At that time, because the avatar fell forward on his face, she was unable to see what the avatar looked like. As the clothing that the avatar was wearing could be worn by both genders, Dina never thought to question which gender the avatar was. As a consequence, Dina mistakenly thought the avatar was an androgynous young girl. For digressing a little, after Dina left Earth, the perception manipulation magic that had been cast on the people was undone. As a result, the game, Xgate Online, suffered due to its horrible balance and quickly deteriorated. Very quickly, the game flopped and its services were terminated. Author note, summary/list of Dina's jobs at the time Ruppas was overthrown. She would be helping out the 7 heroes by sealing Ruppas. The only reason Ruppas was sealed by the Xgate skill, which requires the consent of the one going through, was because Dina was in on the act. She would teach Ruppas how to use the secret skill which allowed the user to create avatars. She would act as the G.O.Dis spy and infiltrate the demon's camp where Soul was hidden. She named herself Venus, then played around with the demons as a puppet master from the inside so that the humanoids would not be annihilated before Ruppas was resurrected. Soul would believe that he was making use of Dina's guise, but in truth, Dina would be the one making use of Soul's guise. Dina would come into contact with the Demon King and reach an alliance behind the scenes with the common goal of taking the G.O.Dis down. Dina would cross over to J.A.Pan and establish an incorporated public company Niente. She would create the game Xgate Online and convey various information to Ruppas's avatar via the game. In other words, the very individual who created the S.H.I+TTY game full of C.R.A.PPY bugs and glitches was this one, not the G.O.Dis. However, because she was so preoccupied with feeding information to the avatar and spent all the time that she had on Earth, there was a blank period where she was not on Midgard. As a consequence, she forgot about Hino's getting old. As a side note, the reason the popularity of the game was different from how Ruppas remembered it to be, extremely popular, was because Dina used perception manipulation to forcibly make Ruppas feel addicted. Going along with the scenario written by the G.O.Dis, Dina would copy the memories and ego of the young boy, who was Ruppas's avatar. She would then return that to Ruppas's real body. The G.O.Dis would think that she had given Ruppas an ego which would be easy to control, but in truth, it would turn out to be the real Ruppas who was just playing that role. As a side note, Ruppas herself would not be aware that she was playing that role. Afterwards, Dina would name herself as Ruppas's advisor and show just enough of her tail so that even the Dumba.S. Ruppas would have some doubt about her. By gradually inducing suspicion towards the G.O.Dis, she would try to wake the original Ruppas up. Dina would subtly lead Rupaz so that Rupaz would retrieve the 12 heavenly stars. Dina would act quite fast.h.I+ly when she was among the ranks of the demons so that Terra would kick her out. This way, Dina would be able to escape Soul's supervision without making him feel suspicious and become free to move. She would match Pollux's movements and escape. This way, the G.O.Dis would see Dina's act as the spy is scared of getting busted by Rupaz, so she ran away, therefore making the G.O.Dis think that Dina was on the G.O.Dis's side. When the G.O.Dis became concerned and focused her attention on Midgard, Dina would escape to the Earth. Dina would then try and lead Rupaz to that world and disclose the whole truth to Rupaz on the Earth where the G.O.Dis was not looking. This is where we currently are. The reason behind why Rupaz felt convinced that Dina was not her enemy and couldn't come to hate her despite the suspicion she had towards Dina was because, subconsciously, Rupaz knew that Dina was on her side. Needless to say, this was an extremely dangerous mission for Dina as there were always a risk of her getting erased by Rupaz herself as a result of the suspicion, and because the Killer Maid's nozzle was always locked onto her. Chapter 160, Rupaz Awakened Raw Link, February 18, 2017, Translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, April 29, 2020, Editor 1, Hand of Vecna, May 4, 2020, Editor 2, Key, May 12, 2020, Translation link, __notice 1, previously in Chapter 99, I wrote Rupaz's HP at level 3000 as 18050000. I made a mistake, it was 1-800-5000. It has now been corrected. Author note, summary of last time Q, so the G.O.Dis's avatar, Dina, turned out to be actually competent, then, could it be that the G.O.Dis herself is also? Please don't worry. The real G.O.Dis is incompetent. Author note end, __TLN, reminder that I/my/me denoted by or is used by the J.A.Paints MC because or is used by a male person. I/my/me denoted by yo is a haughty form, typically used by the real Rupaz in her position as the supreme ruler/king, but is uncommon in real life. I/my/me denoted by watas.h.I+ is commonly used by a female person and in a gender-neutral/polite context. Even while Dina published a game in J.A.Pan and continued to send information to Rupaz's avatar, she frequently went back to Midgard. The reason behind this was to observe the Demon King, ORM. Originally, he was supposed to leave the stage once Rupaz was overthrown. However, for some strange reason, he acted out the farce of beating back the heroes. As a result, it was only natural for the G.O.Dis to have some misgivings about him. In the end, Dina was given the order to observe the Demon King. For Dina, who was undertaking activities in J.A.Pan, this order turned out to be a miscalculation that she could not feel joyful about. Even more annoying was the fact that the Sun Ouroboros's avatar developed an ego of its own and started acting as a subordinate of the G.O.Dis. By this point, Pollux, Parthenos, Taurus, and Aquarius had already commenced with the act of sealing the Ouroboroses. Nevertheless, it was not as if they could completely keep everything under control. There were chances that the Ouroboroses would whimsically create avatars, and there were also chances that those avatars would have egos of their own. It was just that the worst-case scenario had come to pass. In other words, on one hand, Dina had to show that she was properly observing the Demon King, whilst on the other, she needed to hide the fact that she had betrayed the G.O.Dis. Calling her a double agent would have been an understatement. When she was amongst the demons, she had to completely act as a faithful servant of the G.O.Dis. At the same time, she had to come and go between J.A.Pan and Midgard. Yet there was also a positive side of this miscalculation. Because of it, she was able to meet with the Demon King, who was also rebelling against the G.O.Dis, and establish a cooperative relations.H.I+P with him so that they could use each other as covers. Exactly, the Demon King was already aware of Dina's new ident.I.Tie. He was already aware of it, yet he allowed her to continue playing around. After all, he knew it would profit him more this way. And on that fateful day, it was the G.O.Dis's suggestion to implant an alternate ego into Rupaz. By implanting a random person from J.A.Pan, who would have been living in complacency due to a long period of peace, Rupaz would become an Ent.I.Tai who would be easier for her to control, turning her into a chess piece for the G.O.Dis. Yet not even the G.O.Dis could have guessed that Rupaz had long integrated into J.A.Pan and hidden herself using a clone. Rupaz and Dina used this opportunity to their advantage and blatantly copied the memories and ego of Rupaz's avatar, retrieved the fragment of her soul and returned it to Rupaz before bringing her back to Midgard, successfully summoning her back. In other words, the true Ident.I.Tai behind Rupaz at that point was the real Rupaz herself, who was playing the role of someone else who was possessing Rupaz. That was why she showed no hesitation when she needed to fight other people. That was why she did not feel agitated even after taking the lives of others. It was only natural that she felt no sexual urges towards other women, and the way she spoke was only fixed to how it was because, subconsciously, she did not want to lose sight of herself. And in the end, role-playing was role-playing. As long as there was some external stimulus, the actor would wake up. For example, I'm sure you've experienced dreams before. In those dreams, have you ever found yourself in a setting which was otherworldly and could not have existed in reality? Or, alternatively, a dream where you became a character in your favorite game or fictional work. And at that time, did you notice that you were playing the role of that character without feeling out of place? After you woke up and regained your rationality, you might have asked yourself, what was that dream? As if something like that is possible. However, even if such a ma.s.civ turnaround happened afterwards, during the time you were experiencing the dream, you would not have considered the whole situation to be strange in any way. However weird it is, when you are within a dream, you would think of yourself as yourself. Of course, there are times where you may notice that you are dreaming even while you are within a dream. Nevertheless, in most cases, you wouldn't recognize that you were inside a dream. Even if what was happening was such a ridiculous situation that you would instantly know it was a dream if you were awake, you probably wouldn't question it until you actually woke up. In that case, would you say that the you inside the dream is not yourself? The answer to that was, again, no. Although you had to unconditionally accept the setting and act all throughout the dream without questioning the situation, you were still yourself. One Rupaz could be said to have been in such a state. Long story short, Rupaz had been dreaming of someone who took possession of Rupaz. But in the end, what had happened was analogous to being half asleep or daydreaming. As a result, by fighting against strong opponents such as Bennett Nash, she could not help but gradually open her eyes. At that time, she momentarily woke up fully, but noticing that it was not yet the right time, she forcibly went back to sleep and continued role-playing. Yet her sleep had definitely become lighter, thus, she was returning back to her real self. All of that was in accordance with Rupaz and Dina's plans. It was in place to deceive the eyes of the G.O.Dis. For example, if Rupaz had resurrected back on Midgard in her complete state from the beginning, the G.O.Dis would have moved the Ouroboroses without even giving her time to gather her allies. To prevent that from happening, Rupaz needed to purposefully act like a clown. But that was now over. Now, the 12 heavenly stars had all been gathered and her preparations were complete. All that remained was for her to remove the obstacles and gain the right to challenge the G.O.Dis. As such, Dina completely removed all effects caused by the memory perception skill that she had cast on Rupaz. I woke up from my dreams. Although it turned out to be quite cliché, the way I suppose there isn't any reason for me to continue role-playing. The way that I, am right now feels just right. I don't have the sensation of having role-played as someone else, nor do I feel like I've become someone else. My memories didn't get cut off midway but continued seamlessly. Whether it be before I was sealed, while I was daydreaming, or in my current state, all of them are me myself. I had never become someone else. I went to sleep at night, had a dream, and in that dream, I played out the role of myself in a slightly different setting without any questions. Then I was woken up by someone because it was morning. I suppose it's something like that. Until now, I was worried that I might be taken over by Rupaz and I would stop being myself, but all of that feels so stupid now. Now that everything has been unveiled, it turns out that it was all a one-man show that I had been playing by myself. I was role-playing myself while being terrified of myself. If I may say so myself, how laughable I was. Truly comical. Yep. I had a good sleep. It's not every day that I get to experience being so invigorated. I'm sure it was. After all, you were sleeping for over 200 years. The way that I spoke was no longer fixed as it previously was. Now that I had completely registered myself as myself, if it was something as measly as the way I spoke, I could change it however I wanted on a whim. Besides, the way I spoke was like this from the beginning. If I had to pick a point to fix, then it would just be about the first person p.r.o. noun that I used. Thanks for everything that you've done until now, Ophiuchus. You did well in fooling everyone and completing your task in its entirety. I doubt anyone else could have done what you did. Let me express my gratitude. Your words are wasted on me. You did well. Those were the only 3 words that I had in mind. Dina had successfully deceived me, successfully deceived the world, successfully deceived the humanoids, successfully deceived the demons and successfully deceived even the G.O.Dis herself. She managed to feed me information little by little and guided me to the truth by making me doubt her. She managed to prevent the annihilation of the humanoids by manipulating the demon race, and while she was at it, she even managed to evade the supervision of the Sun Ouroboros. By carefully timing her actions and moving around ostensibly, she was able to make Terra suspicious of her, allowing her to run away from the demon race. This must have been to get away from the watchful eyes of the Sun Ouroboros. She then matched Pollux's movements and ran away without anyone else suspecting that she would do so at the time, and whilst pretending to lay low, she moved herself to a world where the G.O.Dis was not looking. Finally, after directing me to where she went, she successfully managed to wake me up. Rupa's angry ilu.s. Tration from Alba Light Novel V7 for now. I guess I'll check my own status once. Rupa's Muffle level 4200 species. Flugel CLA.S.S level warrior 200 sword master 200 archer 200 gunner 200 grappler 200 champion 200 monster tamer 200 alchemist 200 ranger 200 strider 200 acolyte 200 priest 200 esper 200 psychic 200 mage 200 sorcerer 200 the archenemy 1000 HP 400 and 50002 SP 99 999 STR. Strength/attack power 8580 dex, dexterity 38025 VIT, vitality 53170 int, intelligence 65370 AGI, agility/speed 65034 MND, mind power 45045 Luke, luck 49194 equipment head, __. Right arm, __ left arm, __ body, long sleeve S.H.I plus RT and jeans foot, Faz.H.I plus oneable leather boots others, a jumper good, no changes compared to before I was sealed. Although I was worried that I might have become a bit rusty, it seemed that it was a good thing I was still exercising even when I was daydreaming. Without a doubt, I was in my best condition 3 if it's now, I felt like I could destroy even the sun just by punching it. Although I had an urge to test things out, I was currently in J.A.Pan. If I did something like that, the whole place would perish just from the resulting shockwave. As a result, I decided to hold off on the enjoyment of having a test run until I got back to the other world. When I turned back to look at the 2 of them, Dina was smiling even though she was sweating profusely and Bennett had her arms crossed while looking at me with a battle-ready expression. For now, I decided to undo the skill alcade. There was no benefit to be had from releasing my power where I was. Phew. Dina sighed out loud as if she was feeling a sense of relief. It seemed that when I had my power released in my serious state, those in my surroundings could not help but feel unnecessarily intimidated from the pressure I gave off. When I looked down at my arm, the bracelet that I was wearing in order to seal my abilities had cracks running through it. From the looks of things, it was unable to properly rein in my full power and had broken instead. What a wasteful thing I had done. Well, I supposed it would be fine if I fixed it later. Honestly, I don't get the full story, but long story short, everything was in the palm of your hand. Everything that happened during that battle 200 years ago and onwards. I, Wadas.H.I do feel sorry for fooling you. But back then, I had no other option but to do what I did. If I had ended up winning, the G.O.Dis would have moved the Ouroboroses in order to reset everything. 200 years ago, I broke my promise to settle everything with Bennett and acted as the loser. However, by that time, I had already been cornered. Even if I had won the battle, it was already in a state where nothing would have been left. Assuming that I had won at that time, the G.O.Dis would have awakened the Ouroboroses and all lives on Midgard would have perished, for if that had happened, it would have been my loss. A victory where nothing remained on hand was essentially no different from a loss. As such, at that time, I had no option but to lose and leave the stage. Furthermore, I could not have had the powerful force known as Bennett disappear along with me as collateral damage by getting her involved. Your first person P.R.O. Noun. Yeah, I'm back to how I used to be. After all, I'm not a king or anything of the sort anymore. I'm starting again as just Rupa's Muffle. Until now, I had been referring to myself as I, or, in my mind, and had been voicing I, yo, when I talked. But in the end, it most likely turned out that way because I was unable to properly balance my mind and my body. The me, or, that I had been acting as in my vanity as a ruler that had subconsciously seeped into my ident.I.T after a long period of time entangled with each other, resulting in that strange outcome. But all of that was over now. The current me, Wadas.H.I+, was no longer me, or, nor the supreme ruler, yo. Now, I was just an individual from the Flugel race who was being a sore loser and came back for a second round, even though I had already lost once and gotten off the stage. So it did not seem like a bad idea to go back to how I originally was. Back to when I was fighting as just an individual adventurer. After actually seeing from the perspective of a third party, I understood something. That after I became a ruler, I was too hasty. I chased after ideals for no reason other than to reach those ideals. I didn't bother to turn around and look at those around me. And if it was for the sake of reaching my goals, I employed any form of atrocity without any hesitation or remorse. Although I had previously said this already, it was only natural that I was betrayed. Just the fact that I was able to notice all of that meant that I had benefited from having gone through this entire farce. By the way, Ophiuchus, or would you prefer to be called Dina instead? Whichever is fine. I see. Then, Dina, did that person finally show their tail? Yes. Just as my lady predicted they would. When I heard Dina say that, I reflexively smiled. In unison, Dina also smiled as she brushed her hair back. It seemed that the act of devoting ourselves to being clowns had paid off. All thanks to that, we were able to make that certain individual drop their guard. As a result, that individual had committed a mistake that they would not be able to weasel their way out of. As such, all we had to do now was capture them. Now then. I brushed aside the hair in front of my face and faintly smiled. The 12 heavenly stars had all been gathered. We had traveled throughout the humanoids' domain and met up with Migrez, Mirek, and Mizar. We had almost reached our goal. There were only a few enemies remaining. No, from the very beginning, there was only really one Ent.I.Ti that could even be called an enemy. As for Bennett, although we were technically on opposing sides, she was more of my friend than an enemy. So I didn't count her. Antic.I.P. Aiding my next words, Dina showed a nervous expression and Bennett smiled whilst baring her fangs. I then opened my mouth as if to live up to their expectations. Should we go and buy some food and games from this world before we go back home? The two of them fell down at the same time. Hey, wait a minute, Rupa-sama, you did not just do that? You were so charismatic and about to say something like a major boss just then. Muffle, are you fooling around, ub.a.s.t.a.r.d. Although the two of them had started ranting at me, I don't hear anything. Charisma is meant to be broken. Even that certain vampire from a certain fictional work said so. Besides, it isn't often that we come over to this world. We haven't even bought any souvenirs for the people in the other world. On top of that, now that I've regained my memory, it turns out that I'm technically not a citizen of this world. In other words, I haven't technically eaten any J.A. Payne's food other than the hamburger we had a short while ago that was from this world. Now that I think about it that way, you get what I'm saying, right? I just have this irresistible urge to fill myself. Huh? You're saying I haven't changed at all compared to before I regained my memory? Just leave me alone. Honestly, I've always been like this. Rupas Bennett Nash and Dina in J.A. Pan-Ilu.S. Tration from Alba Light Novel V7__. Author note, Q. So what was the thing with the 7 heroes in the game? A. They were chosen from the people who used avatars, character models, which looked like the real ones and were in a position which were as close to the original as possible. They then were A.S.Sist by the admins just to the extent that it would not seem suspicious. They were then gifted with names such as Alioth and Bennett Nash. The players themselves decided to use those names only because they sounded cool. So in reality, the avatars had a different in-game name of their own, for example, something like Alioth's Pasta Mask. Just for reference, Paste Mask was the original name. Needless to say, although it was possible to rig things so that those players would become top players, look similar to the original or possess the same skills, the personalities of the players themselves were quite different from the original. If I were to be more specific and give an example, the player behind Bennett Nash was someone who would come into a group chat whilst saying something like, B.O.D. good/morning. Author note end, TLN, this chapter has too much repit.I. Anyways, this concludes my batch this time. Starting with the next chapter, Vecna will once again serve as the translator and the chapters will be hosted on his site. As usual, please tell him I said hi. Incidentally, I believe this chapter also corresponds with the end of Volume 7 of the light novel, so we only have 2 more volumes worth of chapters, 32 chapters left, until the end of the series. As you have read, a lot of the mysteries have started to unravel and we are in the final stretch. I will see you all again at the end of June/start of July, TP signing out. / characters in J.A. Pan-Ilu.S. Tration from Alba Light Novel V7, pretty much J.A. Payne's V1 to V7 on sale.